We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish.
Such a privilege to understand where we come from, a privilege that's granted to those of us who live after 1859.
That's false. That is not true. That was not the state of scientific knowledge when Darwin came along.
The measly, piddling little ideas that are in Genesis, it's just no comparison.
The scientific community before Darwin, all religious men, not atheists, had already figured out in the preceding decades that the Earth is unbelievably ancient. Countless millions of years. None of them accepted that it was 6,000 years old. Before Darwin, the world is unbelievably ancient, and the history of life on Earth has been a progressive story. Before Darwin, all religious men, not atheists, So if you've heard, as I'm sure everyone listening to me has, that evolution is somehow controversial, well, no, it hasn't been since the 1870s. There are more recent controversies, but those have erupted in the 20th century. This is a new movement, not a still ongoing problem or debate or question with Darwin ever since the beginning. This is a new movement, not a still ongoing problem or debate or question with Darwin ever since the beginning. This is a new movement. This is a new movement. This is a new movement. This is a new movement.
Now a question. What have Herbert Hoover, Art Linkletter, Jack London, and Richard Nixon all had in common? Well, they've all been members of the exclusive all-male Bohemian Club in California.
Bohemian Grove that I attend on time to time. The Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggot goddamn thing you will ever imagine in San Francisco crowd, because it's just terrible. I mean, I can watch shake hands with everybody in San Francisco.
That's the place you attended. It's a secret society. Can you tell us at least who invited you?
You know, it's nice to know that there's some people who have fantasy lives that have nothing to touch with. Nice to have you here. Bye-bye.
You can't answer the question? You can't.
Can I get a quick autograph here? What's this picture of?
I actually don't remember.
Let's see you at the Bohemian Grove. Okay. You told me that I'm delusional. So you were there. Can we talk to you about it, sir? Yep. No questions at all?
Like a boys' camp, the Grove has a symbol, in this case a somewhat fierce-looking owl. It also has a patron saint, St. John of Nepomuk, a legitimate 13th century Bohemian canonized for his sense of honor. Despite its camp-like atmosphere, the Grove does host some serious business.
To the degree that there's anything important happens at the Bohemian Grove, it's political. The important speeches that have been made at the Bohemian Grove have been made, for instance, and the best example, by Richard Nixon.
I've been an investigative reporter and a journalist for 35 years. I've worked in every major media market in the United States, and I've written for more than 100 newspapers and magazines nationally and internationally. Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason.
Hitler has often protested that his plans for conquest do not extend across the Atlantic Ocean, but his submarines and raiders prove otherwise. And so does the entire design of his new world order. For example, I have in my possession a secret map made in Germany by Hitler's government, by the planners of the New World Order.
Union Banking Corporation. In actuality, it was anything but a bank. It was essentially a Nazi money laundering operation that had a lot of tentacles into a lot of different other businesses. They owned a shipping line called Hamburg American Line, for example, which was the first Nazi front business seized, although the line was no longer operational in 1942. In the early 1930s, it transported Nazi spies into the U.S., and then their promotional ads offered cash rewards to any American citizens who would go back on Hamburg American lines and proselytize for Hitler.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
8 months after the U.S. had entered the war, the New York Herald Tribune ran a front-page article, "Hitler's Angel has $3 million in U.S. bank." And it caused a major scandal and just rocked the world of politics. Brown Brothers Harriman, which George Herbert Walker and Prescott Bush were affiliated with and partners in, worked with I.G. Farben, which operated Auschwitz. Prescott Bush, he did a number of things that were not only anti-American but were pro-Hitler, and he did all that he could to proselytize for Hitler and the rise of his Third Reich.
A new world order, a civilization of love can be achieved.
Incredibly, after being warned by the FBI and the Justice Department and the Treasury Department to cease and desist in their Nazi dealings, they had continued them until 1951. There had been 28 additional seizures of Nazi assets and Nazi business fronts between late 1942 and 1951, and that they had moved Nazi assets into Switzerland, Brazil, Argentina, and Panama. And they had continued to do business with their primary Nazi patron, who was Fritz Thyssen, who backed Hitler beginning in 1921 and who was the wealthiest man in Germany, and a steel and coal baron who, with his partner Friedrich Flick, essentially built the Nazi war machine along with I.G. Farben. In 1951, when Fritz Thyssen died in Argentina, Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush doesn't take his philosophical foundation from the Bible or the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country.
Eisenhower gave a speech there. It was the first time the West Coast establishment really saw him close up.
Discussions at the Grove in the 1930s helped lead to the development of nuclear power and the atomic bomb. It was at the Grove in 1967 that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan hashed out differences over their presidential ambitions. Each year, guests like Henry Kissinger or Zbigniew Brzezinski address members on their areas of expertise. Presidential counselor Edwin Meese will be among this year's speakers. And each year, other guests come to the Grove simply to enjoy themselves. This year, CIA Director William Casey is a scheduled guest of John McCone, former CIA Director. Despite the presence... so many notables, the Grove is not without its small headaches. Anti-nuclear demonstrators gathered near the entrance to the retreat this year to wave signs and chant slogans. The Grove is also facing a suit from the state of California because it refuses to hire women. Still, the Bohemian Grove seems in no danger of passing. Herbert Hoover called it the world's greatest men's party. And there is a list of powerful people waiting to get in on it. Steve Shepard, ABC News, San Francisco.
Sounds kind of like you support religion imposing its ideas on the rest of us. I'm very concerned that a branch of Christianity has gotten some of its tenets into our laws, like stem cell research, linking foreign aid to reproductive issues and so forth. If you were president, would you work hard to make Christian social issues the law of the land?
We said in our founding document, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, should we teach children that or not? Fine. How do you think we came to, we're randomly gathered protoplasm? We could have been rhinoceroses, but we got lucky this week?
But if your aim is to kill religion, as mine is, then just let me finish. If your aim is to kill religion, then since evolution is manifestly true, then if there are people out there who really believe that if you are an evolutionist, you've got to be an atheist, then all I've got to do is to persuade them of evolution, which should be comparatively easy, since the evidence is overwhelming, and I'll turn them all into atheists. I'm not one of those who wants to stop Christian traditions. This is historically a Christian country. I'm a cultural Christian. I'm a cultural Christian. The same way as many of my friends call themselves cultural Jews or cultural Muslims. So yes, I love singing carols along with everybody else. 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 I'm not one of those who wants to purge our society of our Christian history.
I am born again. Did you just say that you are Lucifer? I am Lucifer. Define Lucifer for me. Pure, virtuous, wholesome, innocent individual that's out to help people. Lucifer is? Yeah. Say that again. Lucifer is a pure, holy, virtuous.
it's such a privilege to understand where we come from, a privilege that's granted to those of us who live after 1859. I'm a cultural Christian. I'm a cultural Christian. I'm a cultural Christian. So yes, I love singing carols along with everybody else. 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 Purge our society of our Christian history, Christian history, Christian history, Christian history, Christian history.
High school in Budapest, Hungary, in the communist days. And I discovered computers very early, and this was at a time, this was in 1964, 1965, when computers weren't really known by the public in general. And even I, who was a kid interested in science, I had no idea of what computers were for and how they worked especially. And I insinuated myself into a group of computer engineers that accepted me as a free helper in providing programming services. So that's what I was doing in high school. Hungary was a relatively poor country, and it lived on hand-me-downs, for example, from the Soviet state. So we had a computer that was obsolete even by Soviet standards, and the Soviet standards were, of course, quite ways behind the West. So probably in my age group, I must be one of the few people who had experience with the so-called first-generation computers. The Ural, which was a first-generation machine, in terms of size was giant relative to a personal computer, and but in terms of its performance, it was very similar, and that really made me popular among the employees at that particular installation, because there was no high-level language for this particular machine until then. In a communist society, computers didn't have that much role. You know, for example, you couldn't do payroll on them or practical things like that. I think that their idea was that they would optimize the delivery of concrete or coal from the producers to the consumers. People who did programming typically had an electrical engineering education, and my first mentors were all electrical engineers. And I was just enamored by the sheer power of being able to write instructions that is followed by a huge machine. And by huge, I mean physically huge. The computers gave me the ability to leave Hungary. I was invited by a Danish computer firm, Regnecentralen. It was really in the forefront of computer language development. And I spent a year there and kind of refined my computer skills, still not having gone to school. And then I was admitted to University of California at Berkeley. Went to Berkeley. I met a lot of professors there, computer science professors. They started a company called Berkeley Computer Corporation, which went bankrupt, and the ruins of BCC were picked up by Xerox, in part to found this new research center called the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. My project at PART was, among other things, Bravo, which was the first WYSIWYG text editor. So I went to look for a job, and it was fantastic because Microsoft was the first company that I seriously visited. I was very impressed by the idea of software as a business.